welcome in today. Welcome to my book chat. Sorry I missed last week. I got really busy and totally went out of my head. So I'm so sorry about that. So tonight I'm just going to put a few links in here to start with. But for starters, also, welcome YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and people on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining today. Whether you see the replay or the live, whatever, it all works together. So I'm going to put the link in for Whatnot. And then my bookstore is in the crawler in front down here. And also the Twitter address is there, and you should be able to access through that QR. I'm still learning the QR code and what they're doing with that, but it's not quite like most QR codes, so I'm not sure exactly what they're doing with that one. But anyway, so welcome. So tonight we're just going to talk a little bit about what's been going on, and also doing some reading with the Miss Marple Sleeping Murder. This book. We're going to be reading another chapter in there for you guys on here as well on Instagram. And but before we do that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's been going on. I've been super busy with a few things. Some taking care of my mom, who's going to be having a back procedure pretty soon. So that's been going on, and then also, which is part of the reason I forgot last week, so I apologize for that. And also, we've got some sales going on in the bookstore as well as the estate find store on eBay. And also, we are now, and if you want to know anything that's going on, tune in to Twitter and follow me on Twitter, because everything goes through Twitter. I just funnel everything through there so that people know what's going on with us. And then also we are on Whatnot. We just started that in December. So it's going really, really well. And I have surpassed anything I've been doing on eBay as far as selling and that kind of thing. So that is going really well. Whatnot has a very cool book community over there, and so it's very supportive, and it's been very very nice. People are courteous, and they're not crazy yet anyway. And so I encourage anybody that wants to check that out. It's a live auction type thing. It's very easy to sign up to buy, and you get some very good deals over there. It's been actually really nice. There's not a lot of antiquarian books, but there are a lot of used books in certain genres that people really like sci-fi, comic books. There's a whole graphic novel following over there. And so if you're into that type of thing, feel free to hop on over there. I will bring whatever, if anybody wants me to bring something over there that they want to see from eBay, I'm more than happy to do that. Just so, they can see it and, real time, know what the condition is and that kind of thing, because condition is big when you're buying things that are a little more expensive. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on. So thank you for joining me today, whether you're on the replay or live with us today. I don't have a lot of other things to report. I do have, welcome, Anthony. Welcome on Instagram. I don't have a lot of other things to report. It's been going pretty smoothly. Just normal stuff this time of year, trying to get ready for taxes and all that kind of stuff. I am going to start offering a few bookish things um, like bookmarks and things like that. And if you're interested in the whatnot, I do give away bookends now and then on there. And I'm always on there on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. It may end up moving to the evening depending how things are, my schedule is, and I do have to depend on someone to help me on those because sometimes I have 30 to 40 people in there and the feed goes super fast. So my schedule is having to depend on my younger son to help me kind of keep an eye on that while I'm showing books to people, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit different, but so I could end up being in there Thursday evening as well. So we're gonna have to see how that goes. But I think it'll turn out to be a really good thing, and I'm very much enjoying it over there. So anyway, let's get to the reading part. And yes, thank you. Yeah, I've been enjoying it very much. Um, but I've not sold a lot of my antique books, which is, as everybody knows, that's my deal, is the antique books. But I'm enjoying working with people over there and getting to know the community. And I know there is a following for that over there. I just have not kind of figured it out yet because I'm too new to really understand everything. But I it's really positive. Um, and I know there is a following there, but I just have not really um, kind of come into that yet. But um, so anyway, um, so I guess we'll go ahead and start in tonight with the sleeping murder. Now, if you haven't followed this on here before, this is it's a little bit creepy, I have to admit. I find it a little bit creepy because it's about this woman who she's kind of newly married and her husband works abroad and she's now settling down in England in this area near the coast. It says where it is, and I'm not that super familiar with England, so I don't know exactly, but where it's at. But it sounds lovely from the way the book describes it. And so it's about this woman who buys this house that is actually, it's nice, but it's a fixer upper and they're having to redo some things. And so she's having these deja vu type feelings, like, and seeing things that she thinks maybe happened there before and stuff. And so now she's starting to think that she maybe lived there as a child and didn't really realize it. And because her parents worked in other countries and she lived with them as far as she knew, but then it kind of is starting to kind of turn this corner of, oh, maybe I lived here and this is why I'm getting all these deja vu type feelings. And anyway, so it's really interesting. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead and start on chapter 5. And if I end up taking my glasses off, it's because I've got this weird phenomena at nighttime where instead of my eyes getting tired, they start seeing better for some reason, and I have to take my glasses off to see better. I know it's weird, but anyway. So Chapter 5, Murder in Retrospect. It was some 10 days later that Miss Marple entered a small hotel in Mayfair and was given an enthusiastic reception by young Mr. and Mrs. Reed. Let me turn this down just a little bit here. I feel like this thing is gonna keep buzzing, you guys. Sorry, I want to turn that down so it's not buzzing. Okay. This is my husband, Miss Marple, Giles. I can't tell you how kind Miss Marple was to me. I'm delighted to meet you, Miss Marple. I hear Gwenda nearly panicked herself into a lunatic asylum. Miss Marple's gentle blue eyes summed up Giles Reed favorably, a very likable young man, tall and fair, with a disarming way of blinking every now and then out of a natural shyness. She noted his determined chin and the set of his jaw. We'll have tea in the little writing room, the dark one, said Gwenda. Nobody ever comes there, and then we can show Miss Marple Aunt Allison's letter. Yes, she added, as Miss Marple looked up sharply. It's come, and it's almost exactly what you thought. Tea over the airmail letter was spread out and read. Get this a little bit. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit better. Dearest Gwenda, Miss Danby had written, I was much disturbed to hear that you had had some worrying experience. To tell you the truth, it had really entirely escaped my memory that you had actually resided for a short time in England as a young child. Your mother, my sister Megan, met your father, Major Halliday, when she was on a visit to some friends of ours, at that time stationed in India. They were married, and you were born there. About 2 years after your birth, your mother died. It was a great shock to us, and we wrote to your father, with whom we had corresponded, but whom actually we had never seen, begging him to entrust you to our care, as we would be only too glad to have you, and it might be difficult for an army man stranded with a young child. Your father, however, refused, and told us he was resigning from the army and taking you back with him to England. He said he hoped we would at some time come over and visit him there. I understand that on the voyage home your father met a young woman, became engaged to her, and married her as soon as he got to England. The marriage was not, I gather, a happy one, and I understand they parted about a year later. It was then that your father wrote to us and asked if we were still willing to give you a home. I need hardly tell you, my dear, how happy we were to do so. You were sent out to us, in charge of an English nurse, and at the same time your father settled the bulk of his estate upon you and suggested that you might legally adopt our name. This, I may say, seemed a little curious to us, but we felt that it was kindly meant and intended to make you more one of the family. We did not, however, adopt the suggestion. About a year later, your father died in a nursing home. I surmise that he had already received bad news about his health at the time when he sent you out to us. So I'm afraid I cannot tell you where you lived while you with your father in England. His letter naturally had the address on it at the time, but that is now 18 years ago, and I'm afraid one doesn't remember such details. It was in the south of England, I know, and I fancy Dilmouth is correct. I had a vague idea it was Dartmouth, but the two names are not alike. I believe your stepmother married again, but I have no recollection of her name, not even of her unmarried name, though your father had mentioned it in the original letter telling of his remarriage. We were, I think, a little resentful of his marrying again so soon, but of course no one knows that on board ship the influence of propinquity is very great, and he may also have thought that it would be a good thing on your account. It seems stupid of me not to have mentioned to you that you had been in England, even if you didn't remember the fact. But as I say, the whole thing had faded from my mind. Your mother's death is India, and your subsequently coming to live with us always seemed the important points. I hope this is all cleared up now. I do trust Giles will soon be able to join you. It is hard for you both being parted at this early stage, and all my news in my next letter as I am sending this off hurriedly in answer to your wire. Your loving Aunt Allison Danby. P.S. You do not say what your worrying experience was. You see, said Gwenda, it's almost exactly as you suggested. Miss Marple smoothed out the flimsy sheet. Yes, indeed. The common sense explanation I've found, you know, that is so often right. Well, I'm very grateful to you, Miss Marple, said Giles. Poor Gwenda was thoroughly upset, and I must say I have been rather worried myself to think that Gwenda was clairvoyant or psychic or something. It might be a disturbing quality in a wife, said Gwenda, unless you always led a thoroughly blameless life, which I have, said Giles. And the house. What do you feel about the house? Asked Miss Marple. Oh, that's all right. We're going down tomorrow. Giles is dying to see it. I don't know whether you realize it, Miss Marple, said Giles, but what it amounts to is that we've got a first class murder mystery on our hands, actually on our very doorstep, or more accurately, in our front hall. I had thought of that, yes, Miss Marple said Miss Marple slowly. And Giles simply loves detective stories, said Gwenda. Well, I mean, it is a detective story. Body in the hall of a beautiful strangled woman, nothing known of her but her Christian name. Of course, I know it's nearly 20 years ago. There can't be any clues after all this time, but one can at least cast about and try to pick up some of the threads. Oh, I dare say one won't succeed in solving the riddle. I think you might, said Miss Marple, even after 18 years. Yes, I think you might, but at any rate, it won't do any harm to have a real good try. Giles paused, his face beaming. Miss Marple moved uneasily. Her face was grave, almost troubled. But it might do a great deal of harm, she said. I would advise you both. Oh, yes, I really would advise it very strongly to leave the whole thing alone. Leave it alone? Our very own murder mystery? It was. What if it was murder? It was murder, I think. And that's just why I should leave it alone. Murder isn't. It really isn't a thing to tamper with light-heartedly. Giles said, but Miss Marple, if everybody felt like that. She interrupted him. Oh, I know. There are times when it is one's duty. An innocent person accused, suspicion resting on various other people, a dangerous criminal at large who may strike again. But you must realize that this murder is very much in the past. Presumably, it wasn't known for murder. If so, you would have heard fast from your old gardener or someone down there. A murder, however long ago, is always news. No, the body must have been disposed of somehow, and the whole thing never suspected. Are you sure? Are you really sure that you are wise to dig it all up again? Miss Marple, cried Gwenda, you sound really concerned. I am, my dear. You are two very nice and charming young people. If you will allow me to say so, you are newly married and happy together. Don't, I beg you, start to uncover things that may, that may, how shall I put it, that may upset and distress you. Gwenda stared at her. You're thinking of something special. Of something. What is it you're hinting at? Not hinting, dear, just advising you, because I've lived a long time and know how very upsetting human nature can be. To let well alone. That's my advice. Let well alone. But it isn't. But it isn't letting well alone. Giles' voice held a different note, a sterner note. Hillside is our house, Gwenda's and mine, and someone was murdered in that house. Or so we believe. I'm not going to stand for murder in my house and do nothing about it, even if it is 18 years ago. Miss Marple sighed. I'm sorry, she said. I imagine that most young people, men of spirit, would feel like that. I even sympathize and almost admire you for it, but I wish, oh, I do wish that you wouldn't do it. Number 2 of 5, chapter 5. On the following day, news went round the village of St. Mary Mead that Miss Marple was at home again. She was seen in the High Street at 11 o'clock. She called the vicarage at 10 minutes to 12. That afternoon 3 of the gossipy ladies of the village called upon her and obtained her impressions of the gay metropolis, and this tribute to politeness over themselves plunged into details of an approaching battle over the fancy work stall at the feet and position of the tea tent. Later that evening Miss Marple could be seen, as usual, in her garden, but for once her activities were more concentrated on the depredations of weeds than on activities of her neighbors. She was distraught at her frugal evening meal and hardly appeared to listen to her little maid Evelyn's spirited account of the goings-on of the local chemist. The next day she was still distraught, and one or two, including the vicar's wife, remarked upon it. That evening Miss Marple said she did not feel very well, and took to her bed. The following morning she sent for Dr. Haydock. Dr. Haydock had been Miss Marple's physician, friend, and ally for many years. He listened to her account of her symptoms, gave her an examination, then sat back in his chair and waggled his stethoscope at her. For a woman of your age, he said, and in spite of that misleading, frail appearance, you're in remarkably good fettle. I'm sure my general health is sound, said Miss Marple, but I confess I do feel a little overtired, a little run down. You've been gallivanting about, late nights in London. That, of course, I do find London a little tiring nowadays, and the air so used up, not like fresh seaside air. The air of St. Mary Mead is nice and fresh, but often damp and rather muggy. Not, exactly bracing. Dr. Haydock eyed her with a dawning of interest. I'll send you round a tonic, he said obligingly. Thank you, doctor. Easton syrup is always very helpful. There's no need for you to do my prescribing for me, woman. I wondered if perhaps a change of air. Miss Marple looked questioningly at him with guileless blue eyes. You've just been away for 3 weeks. I know, but to London, which, as you say, is innervating, and then up north, a manufacturing district, not like bracing sea air. Dr. Haydock packed up his bag, then he turned around, grinning. Let's hear why you sent for me, he said. Just tell me what it's to be, and I'll repeat it after you. You want my professional opinion that what you need is sea air. I knew you'd understand, said Miss Marple gratefully. Excellent thing, sea air. You'd better go to Eastbourne right away, or your health may suffer seriously. Eastbourne, I think, is rather cold. The Downs, you know. Bournemouth, then, or the Isle of Wight. Miss Marple twinkled at him. I always think a small piece is much pleasanter. Dr. Haydock sat down. My curiosity is roused. What small seaside town are you suggesting? Well, I had thought of Dilmouth. Pretty little place, rather dull. Why Dilmouth? For a moment or two Miss Marple was silent. The worried look had returned to her eyes. She said, supposing that one day, by accident, you turned up a fact that seemed to indicate that many years ago, 19 or 20, a murder had occurred. The fact was known to you alone. Nothing of the kind had ever been suspected or reported. What would you do about it? Murder in retrospect, in fact? Just exactly that. Haydock reflected for a moment. There had been no miscarriage of justice. Nobody had suffered as a result of this crime. As far as one can see, no. Murder in retrospect. Sleeping murder. Well, I'll tell you. I'd let sleeping murder lie. That's what I'd do. Messing about with murder is dangerous. It can be very dangerous. That's what I'm afraid of. People say a murderer always repeats his crimes. That's not true. There's a type who commits a crime, manages to get away with it, and is darn careful never to stick a neck out again. I won't say they live happily ever after. I don't believe that's true. There are many kinds of retribution, but outwardly, at least, all goes well. Perhaps that was so in the case of Madeline Smith, or again in the case of Lizzie Borden, it was non-proven in the case of Madeline Smith, and Lizzie was acquitted, but many people believe those women were guilty. I could name you others. They never repeated their crimes. One crime gave them what they wanted, and they were content. But suppose some danger had menaced them. I take it your killer, whoever he or she is, was one of a kind. He committed a crime and got away with it and nobody suspected. But supposing somebody goes poking about, digging into things, turning up stones, and exploring avenues, and finally, perhaps hitting the target, what's your killer going to do about it? Just stay there smiling while the hunt comes nearer and nearer? No, if there's no principle involved, I'd say let it alone. He repeated his former phrase, let sleeping murder lie, he added firmly. And those are my orders to you. Let the whole thing alone. But it's not I who am involved. It's two very delightful children, let me tell you. She told him the story, and Haydock listened. Extraordinary, he said, when she had finished. Extraordinary coincidence. Extraordinary business together. I suppose you see what the implications are. Oh, of course, but I don't think it's occurred to them yet. It will mean a good deal of unhappiness, and they'll wish they'd never meddled with the thing. Skeletons should be kept in their cupboards. Still, I can quite see young Giles' point of view. Dash it all, I couldn't leave the thing alone myself. Even now I'm curious. He broke off and directed a stern glance at Miss Marple. So that's what you're doing with your excuses to get to Dilmouth, mixing yourself up in something that's no concern of yours. Not at all, Dr. Haydock, but I'm worried about those two. They're very young and inexperienced and much too trusting and credulous. I feel I ought to be there to look after them. So that's why you're going, to look after them? Can't you ever leave murder alone, woman? Even murder in retrospect? Miss Marple gave a small, prim smile. But you do think, don't you, that a few weeks at Dilmouth would be beneficial to my health? More likely to be the end of you, said Dr. Haydock. But you won't listen to me. On her way to call upon her friends, Colonel and Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple met Colonel Bantry coming along the drive, his gun in his hand and a spaniel at his heels. He welcomed her cordially. Glad to see you back. How's London? Miss Marple said that London was very well. Her nephew had taken her to several plays, highbrow ones, I bet. Only care for a musical comedy myself. Miss Marple said that she had been to a Russian play that was very interesting, though perhaps a little too long. Russians, said Colonel Bantry explosively. He had once been given a novel by Dostov- Dostoevsky to read in a nursing home. He added that Miss Marple would find Dolly in the garden. Welcome, let's see, Lent? Vintage paper? Welcome. I think you're a new person, so welcome. Miss Bantry was almost always to be found in the garden. Gardening was her passion. Her favorite literature was bulb catalogues, and her conversation dealt with primulas, bulbs, flowering shrubs, and alpine novelties. Miss Marple's first view of her was a substantial posterior clad in faded tweed. At the sound of approaching steps, Mrs. Bantry reassumed an erect position with a few creaks and winces. Her hobby had made her rheumaticy. It's RHEUMATICKY. Lest you think I don't know how to read. Try to say that word. My goodness. Wiped her hot brow with an earth-stained hand and welcomed her friend. Heard you were back, Jane, she said. Aren't my new delphiniums doing well? Have you seen these new little gentians? I've had a bit of trouble with them, but I think they're all set now. What we need in rain, it's been terrible dry, she added. Easter? Oh, Esther, sorry, told me you were ill in bed. Esther was Mrs. Bantry's cook, and liaison officer with the village. I'm glad to see it's not true. Just a little overtired, said Miss Marple. Dr. Haydock thinks I need some tea, some sea air. I'm rather run down. Oh, but you couldn't go away now, said Mrs. Bantry. This is absolutely the best time of the year in the garden. Your border must be coming into flower. Dr. Haydock thinks it would be advisable. Well, Haydock's not such a fool as some doctors, admitted Mrs. Bantry grudgingly. I was wondering, Dolly, about that cook of yours. Which cook? Do you want to cook? You don't mean that woman who drank, do you? No, no, no. I mean the one who made such delicious pastry with a husband who was the butler. Oh, you mean the mock turtle, said Mrs. Bantry with immediate recognition. Woman with a deep, mournful voice who always sounded as though she was just going to burst into tears. She was a good cook. Husband was a fat, rather lazy man. Arthur always said he watered the whiskey. I don't know. Pity there's always one of a couple that's unsatisfactory. They got left a legacy by some former employer, and they went off and opened a boarding house in the South Coast. That's just what I thought. Wasn't it at Dilmouth? That's right. 14 Sea Parade, Dilmouth. I was thinking that as Dr. Haydock has suggested the seaside, I might go to. Was their name Saunders? Yes, that's an excellent idea, Jane. You couldn't do better. Mrs. Saunders will look after you, and as it's out of the season, they'll be glad to get you and won't charge very much. With good cooking and sea air, you'll soon pick up. Thank you, Dolly, said Miss Marple. I expect I shall. And that's the end of chapter 5. That's a pretty long chapter because there's 3 parts in it. So the next one is chapter 6, exercise and detection. So we're going to go ahead and stop there. And if you guys have any questions or anything, welcome Dusty Attic. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or anything, be sure and leave them in the comments. And I'll be happy to answer anything that, you might be wondering about, book related. And so I guess we will hang it up for tonight, but join me next Monday. I'll be here at 7:30 Central Standard Time, and we will continue the reading. And in the meantime, come join us on Thursday at 1 in the Whatnot live auction, and we like to have fun over there, and I usually have some sort of giveaway or something like that just for fun. And hopefully I'll have my bookmarks done by then. I'm hoping that I do. So we'll see how that goes. But alrighty, well, everybody have a great week, and I will see you next Monday. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you for joining.